It was quite interesting watching the news this morning. All the same familiar faces on the various cable TV stations were saying it was a great week for the stock market. While I'm sure it was indeed a good week, they still forget to tell us that we are now closer to a disaster of the magnitude of the 1929 stock market crash than at any time in our history. Suddenly, all those incredible gains in the so-called stock market can turn into nothing in just a few minutes. Why? Many different theories will be heard, but bond yields go up, values go down, and at some point a huge number of banks inside the United States and around the world will look at all those treasury bonds they invested in 20 years ago when interest rates were very low and find, holy shit, they're worthless. How do we get rid of them now? Once that happens, there will be a massive sell-off of bonds like no one has ever seen before, and it will cause the financial system to collapse. Some people will stand up and say, look, it wasn't that long ago that something like this happened to the British. I believe it was in the spring, around March, but the Bank of England said no, we'll buy up everything we need. And they managed to get through the crisis. The conditions that prevailed in the UK a few months ago, and that are still there, apply to the United States as well. We will not be able to overcome this crisis. We are not able to just buy up all the bonds. It is simply not possible. Now add to that the horrendous national debt that is already reflected in the Federal Reserve spreadsheets and balance sheet. And then look at banks across the country. The bankruptcy of Silicon Valley Bank was just the beginning. Several other banks have collapsed as well. We keep hearing reports of banks failing. At some point, everything collapses. If you ask someone like Nassim Taleb, this gentleman articulated the concept of the black swan. When it will happen, he will look at you and say, Armageddon is already visible on the horizon. But I can't tell you when it will happen. I can't tell you either. But it's definitely coming. Then there are exogenous forces, circumstances outside the United States, such as the Ukrainian conflict. What's going on in Ukraine doesn't seem to bother most Americans too much. But let me tell you, the Russians are pushing forward hard and destroying everything in their path. And then they're going to turn west. This is going to have a powerful impact on Europe. And in the United States, we're going to feel the impact as well. As you know, economically and financially, the Europeans are significantly more vulnerable than we are. Germany and France are the most important nations in Europe. Germany is already in a deep recession, and there is no easy way out of it. They are currently following a path that leads to national suicide, which is the path they took the moment they decided to join the anti-Russian proxy war, and I see no easy way out for them. Meanwhile, France is a seething cauldron of anger and hostility because millions of people of non-European origin are flooding into this country, threatening the very existence of France, not just French national identity, French history and culture, but all of France, the nation-state as such. The rest of Europe is watching what is happening. You know what they always say about Paris. When Paris sneezes, the rest of Europe gets a cold. My guess is that we will soon see something like this. In other words, this is another way to end the conflict in Ukraine. An economic crisis. Money suddenly runs out. Everyone decides to minimize losses and withdraws troops. The Europeans have already switched on the back, but we haven't yet. Because, frankly speaking, $28 billion is nothing to us. When you have a foreign debt of $34 trillion, and it is almost 120% of GDP, will a pathetic $28 billion make a difference? So that's the way things are. That's one option. And there is another one, everyone dreams of it. But so far, there is no sign of it. For that to happen, someone in Europe, or even here in the United States, has to say, we need a way out. It's time to put an end to this. There are no such people in Washington, so the only possible course of events is if the Europeans distance themselves from us, and this, in fact, will be the end of NATO. The European Union is already in a coma. Everyone hates it. The reasons may be different, but everyone hates it. For example, the Germans are not happy with the EU because they are tired of being a cash cow. But everyone else blames the Germans for their problems. Everyone is fed up with the EU, which is why no one in Washington, and certainly no European government, is willing to step up and make peace, because that would be an existential threat to them. They are the ones at war with the Russian state and the Russian people, not us. And they are fighting because Russia, Europe's last nation state, has no intention of opening its borders wide open to millions of non-Europeans and non-Christians. Yes, there are 20 to 25% Muslims in Russia, but they are perfectly happy with their life in the country. And then this is not news either. In 1915, the Turks got together in a crusade, only Muslim, and thought they would liberate all the Muslims of Tsarist Russia. But they crossed the Caucasus Ridge and found out that no one was eager. To liberate life under the Tsar suited everyone. Be that as it may, the situation in Moscow today is similar. But the point is that Russia will not break. It will not tolerate our hegemony, neither financial nor military, and it will not bow its head to our political domination. So the only way to end this, according to the third option, is for the Europeans to stand up and say that's it, we've had enough. We, of course, do not want that, but it feels like we are trying our best to make sure that this is how it ends.